Hi, this is Mark McPherson, movie critic for Moviespoon.com and TwinCitiesGeek.com. I haven't been at this quite a while. I missed a whole month of movies, so I'll get to the three big ones this week that I wanted to talk about. So our first film is The Disaster Artist, the Tommy Wiseau story about how he came to make the film known as The Room. Now, this is a film that it could have punched downward. It could have, just been an entirely mocking of Tommy Wiseau. Despite the fact that this film is based on a real book about the experience of what it was like working with Tommy. And surprisingly, it doesn't actually manages to be very humanizing, but still incredibly hilarious picture of Tommy Wiseau. James Franco plays the mysterious Tommy Wiseau, who, if you want to work with him, he's very secretive. You don't talk about him, you don't ask his age or where he's from or where his money came from. He's just such an enigma. But Greg finds himself, an amateur actor, played by Dave Franco here, he finds himself infatuated with him because Greg, he can't remember his lines and he doesn't have the courage to get up there on the stage and sort of do what Tommy does, just fearlessly go into it. But he's attracted to that, and he's like, oh, I want to go with you, Tommy. And Tommy's a little bit reluctant at first, but he's kind of like, oh well, you fine, we'll team up. And Tommy's actually, you kind of understand why Greg would go with Tommy, because he's such a because he's an ambitious guy and he's full of dreams, and he's inspirational. At one point they start talking about James Dean, like they love James Dean and they study his acting. And at one point, Greg says like, "Oh, I really want to visit the site where he died." And Tommy's like, "Well, why don't we just go tonight?" And they end up going. And then they later decide, in the car ride, that's like, oh man, we should go to LA and we should be actors. Tommy's like, well, why don't we? Well, I got an apartment there. We can do it. And then when they get to LA, they're living together and they're trying to make the dream happen. And but then no one's hiring them, so it's like, well, why don't we just make our own movie? And so that happens, and that eventually leads to the production of The Room. And the way that it goes about it, I mean, like first off, let's just mention the acting. I mean, James Franco loses himself in the role of Tommy. I mean, it could have been just an easy, jokey role. Everyone has their own version of Tommy that they can do with the oh hi Mox or yo tear me apart Lisa. Everyone has their own version of that. But James embodies the character so well that he loses himself in there, where it doesn't really feel as much like James trying to be Tommy here. It actually felt like he was in character the entire time, which is great because a lot of the humor just comes from like just the natural character of Tommy, like even just his just like his naivete of trying to read references. Like he's never seen the movie Home Alone, which is Greg's inspiration for getting into acting. So it's kind of like, oh, you were home alone as a kid. And then and just like just his inability to read sarcasm and read people. Like the first time he sees Greg in his neighborhood, he's playing with some little kids, and Greg says like, "Oh, this is an amazing car. I've never seen a car like this." And Tommy's response is like, "Well, of course you haven't. You hang around with little kids all the time." And then of course there's that wonderful moment from the trailer where Greg's mother asks Tommy's age, and he says, "Oh, I'm the same age as your son." It's like, "Oh, you're 19? Oh yeah, well I just turned 14. Oh, happy birthday." Just brilliant little scenes like that. And of course, what's interesting about Tommy, aside from just the enigma of trying to decipher him, which we never quite do, it's just watching, his filmmaking process, because he's such a jerk to people on set. He ends up making a lot of errors. His director of photography, played by Seth Rogen, tries to like correct him and says like, maybe you should do this. This is typically I do it in a film. And Tommy's like, no, I know how to do filmmaking. This is the way you do it. This is how you make a film. And you can tell that Tommy is he's studied a lot of about film, but more for like the passion than the technicalities of it. Like at one point, he's being a jerk to everyone on set, and Greg's taking him aside. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you insulting your actors and your crew and everything? Why are you doing that? And he cites, Alfred Hitchcock, he threw real birds at his actors. He was a jerk, and it's like, well, yeah, he was a jerk, but he made The Birds, and The Birds is a pretty recognizable film now from Alfred Hitchcock. And so it's kind of like, yeah, he's being a jerk, but he's taken from what he's learned, especially he's a big fan of James Dean, and like there's a moment where he's watching James Dean like explode with rage at the television, and he just kind of looks at us like that's who I want to be. That's my acting. And everyone in the audience is laughing because we know what scene is coming. We know what is happening inside his head. Which, I mean, this film is. I'm curious how this film is going to play for people who haven't seen The Room, because like the audience I saw it with, we'd all seen The Room. We'd all been familiar with it. A couple people had read the books, the actual book, the Disaster Artist. So immediately it's hilarious just from the first scene where you have all these actual celebrities and directors talking about Tommy Wiseau in The Room as if it's some grand masterpiece. How he's such a genius for making this film, and we're laughing because we know that it's not a good film, and Tommy's a little bit of an odd duck and everything. But at the same time, you're kind of like, well, actually, you know what? Yeah, I kind of actually would like to be on this set. I kind of would meet with Tommy because, I mean, yeah, it turned out to be a bad film, but it turned out to be one of the best bad movies ever made. And I think what makes it so admirable for being so bad is that it came from a place of just genuine, from Tommy's own passion. And then especially at the end when he gets to the point where he has the premiere and everyone's laughing at him, and he's just like, oh, they're all laughing at me. I can't stand it. It gets to this really sweet point where he realizes, oh well, people are laughing at it, and I made them laugh, and would Hitchcock ever do that? And it ended up becoming a midnight cult hit where it's essentially the 21st century Rocky Horror Picture Show. And that in itself, like, that's, he embraces that. And he has fun with that. And because he can laugh at himself, we can laugh at how this film was made even more. And especially because this is an amazing comedy. Like, I mean, it treats Tommy like a human, but at the same time, you get to laugh at his personality, his eccentricities, his mistakes that he makes on set. Like some of them, like you can tell they're amped up. Like with him not remembering the line of like, "Oh, hi, Mark." Like he had to do that line over and over when apparently, according to Tommy, he didn't really do that. Or how inept he is at football. Again, Tommy arguing, I'm not that bad at football. But, it takes some liberties, but for the most part, it's genuinely humorous, just for what it's staging here. And the few times that it does go into a little bit of the more uncomfortable scenes with drama, it feels natural. So that the laughs come a little bit easier and don't feel as forced, where it's like, okay, here's the jokes and here's the drama. It kind of like shifts in between there, like it feels very natural. And because of that, I think it's one of the best comedies of the year. Like, I had so many huge laughs at this, especially when we get to the end credit scene. And with most movies about true stories, it ends with like here's the credits, here's what really happened with Tommy, and after that, and then they have that great sequence where they showcase the scenes they restaged from The Room for The Disaster Artist next to scenes from the actual version of The Room, and the accuracy is impeccable here, and it just makes it that much more hilarious to watch The Room in this kind of like weird stereo. And definitely do stay for the post-credit sequence. Usually I hate these post-credit Easter egg stuff like that, but I'm telling you, stay for it just for the amazing cameo that just sent me out of the theater with a huge laugh. The Disaster Artist, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely a must-see this year. It's probably going to get a nomination for Best Actor. Alright, so next movie is, speaking of best actors, we need to talk about The Darkest Hour, the Winston Churchill film starring Gary Oldman. And you really have to look at Gary Oldman there. You're like, is that really Gary Oldman? Is that doesn't quite look like him. And what's amazing about this film is that Gary Oldman loses himself so much in the role of Winston Churchill that director Joe Wright gets the camera in close. He has a lot of close-ups of Oldman as Churchill, and you can see like every vein in his head, every glint in his eye, the fat under his chin, and just the blubbering in his lips. And and it's just, and you can't see Oldman. You're that close, and you're staring directly at him, and it's just like it feels like Churchill. And it's mainly because he embodies, the cantankerous nature, the turning wheels inside his head of what to do next, the general charisma he has towards his wife, the awkwardness he has towards King George. It just feels like such a complete character that you just can't get enough of seeing. Now the film covers about a month's worth of events, from when he was sworn in as prime minister up to the point where he had to make the big decision about going into war or entering into negotiations with Adolf Hitler. And it was a tough call. What's amazing about this film is like you get to see like Churchill as this kind of like machine, like he can crank out like speeches and be have a great relationship with his wife, and have try to establish a great relationship with his political party, and he just tries to balance all these plates in the air. But as the war starts to increase and the casualties mount, and he starts losing the faith in his political party, you see the doubt sort of come over his face and kind of like take some of that electricity out of him. Like it starts in like small moments. Like there's a moment where he's addressing the nation over a radio broadcast, and the second that they go live, he's finishing up his notes as before it goes live, and then it goes live. The red light comes on, and he freezes. It's only for a few moments, but he freezes because he has that moment like, wow, what if I screw this up? What will happen? Am I making the right decision? And that doubt kind of carries over more and more into the film as the war becomes an increasing threat. And then you have, and eventually gets to a point where he just starts like kind of like blubbering and muttering to himself, like I don't know what I'm doing. But he's so amazing to watch in all these scenes, just especially the scenes with King George, because they feel hilariously awkward. There's a great moment where they're having lunch, and Churchill is having a hard drink, and it's obviously not his first hard drink of the day. And so King George asks, like, how can a man such as you, smoke cigars and drink so much in a day? And Churchill has the perfect answer: practice. Just practice, because you can tell he's been at this a long time, especially when his new secretary, played by Lily James, first meets him in his bedroom, and the curtains are barely drawn, and he's lit a cigarette, and he's already got something he wants her to type immediately. He's constantly moving, constantly. But you get to see that doubt in him. So there's also, you get to see him as kind of a human, in terms of also being this cantankerous guy who can be a force in the Commons, but at the same time kind of laugh at himself when he kind of does the peace sign, like kind of like the up your bum thing, and have a laugh at it. So it's a great performance. Oldman's great in it, but how is the rest of the film? Is the rest of the film pretty good? And it actually is. There's some great cinematography. It's edited very well. Joe Wright doesn't waste our time with this, especially with a lot of these historical films. They tend to get lost in the little details outside there, especially considering, there's the whole war in Dunkirk. It could have gotten entirely lost there, but it doesn't. And it's good too, because then you can go watch this year's other great film about war, the Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, and you can have a great double feature there. So you can see what actually went down in Dunkirk, and then what was actually going on with Winston Churchill in England. So it makes for a great double feature here. So yeah, definitely, Oldman's gonna get a Best Actor nomination, and he deserves it, especially because Oldman's such an amazing actor, and he really hasn't had any even like good roles in like the last few years, and this is easily the best of his entire career. So The Darkest Hour, 4.5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, we've got to mention one of my favorite films of the year, Pixar's Coco. And this is definitely up there as one of Pixar's best. And Pixar films, I find the best ones are the ones that can bring you into a different world and keep you there. And make it feel like there's an actual story going on there, not just get lost in the the visual splendor of it. And Coco is definitely that. It's a story. It's a story that feels very original, very different, even though a lot of people, when I first went to the press screening, there was a lot of talk among the parents, like, oh, wasn't there that other animated film about the Land of the Dead? It's like, oh yeah, it was the Book of Life. This is, even though it takes place in Land of the Dead, this is nothing like the Book of Life in terms of the narrative it's weaving. What it's about is this boy named Miguel who wants to play music, but his family hates it. They, because his great great grandfather walked out on their family many decades ago to play music. And so Miguel figures like, well, I'm still gonna play music because my hero, the late Ernesto de la Cruz, he was a Mexican celebrity who played the guitar, and he could act and sing, and he could play the guitar so well. And then he finds out that, well, maybe Ernesto might be my great grandfather, my great great grandfather. So he becomes inspired, and he steals Ernesto's guitar and ends up cursing him to the land of the dead, where all the spirits go, and they all have just their skeletons. That's all you see of them. And there's a lot of exposition here that's established. Like the only way for Miguel to get back is he has to have the blessing of his ancestors, but all his ancestors won't let him go back unless he renounces music because his entire family hates music. Well, it figures, well, maybe if Ernesto is my great great grandfather, he could, bring me back to the land of the living by giving me his blessing. And if I don't get his blessing by sunup, I'm going to be stuck here as a skeleton forever. So there's a lot of rules to establish this world, but I'm glad they do, because once you have all these rules established, you can enjoy the story without kind of like questioning all the little aspects of the land of the dead. And then you can start having this really great story about, learning about your lineage, your passion, and this is a story with jealousy and murder. And, well, I mean, it takes place in the land of the dead. You're going to have to talk about death. And there's a really dark moment where in the land of the dead, if you're not remembered, you pass on into like the next world. Like your bones essentially just evaporate and go somewhere else. So it's very important that you're remembered, especially because, like, if you're remembered, you can go back to the land of the living and visit your relatives. And it's surprisingly sweet. It's pretty dark. It's got some fun musical numbers though. And of course, I gotta mention it for the parents. You are gonna weep, not once but twice. I mean, everyone. There's that moment in Pixar's Inside Out, one of their best films, where Joy is holding all like the memories of Riley and just sobbing, saying like, I could listen to her little stories forever, and just like that's every parent sobbing at that point. And there are two scenes in Coco, one during the climax where you find out the truth about Miguel's past. His family's past, and then another where we finally bring it around to Coco, Miguel's great grandmother, and it made me weep. And I saw it at the press screening, and I was almost to tears, and then I saw it again over Thanksgiving break, and I just wept, wept so hard. And if Pixar can do that and bring me into a completely different world and give me a story I've never seen before, especially for one that's that's going to have a comparison of the Book of Life, and like I completely forgot about the Book of Life. I mean, I like the Book of Life, but but there's no comparison here. Like, this is easily one of Pixar's best. It is up there with Inside Out as these original, well-defined movies that take place in a different world with different characters you've never seen before. I mean, this is the type of animation that Pixar should be doing more. Forget Cars 3, forget Finding Dory. Like, I'll even say, like, I don't think they should be doing stuff like Toy Story 4 and Incredibles 2. I'm sure they'll be great films, but I want to see them explore so many different avenues, just like Coco did, 'cause there's so many great ideas here, and they have so much fun with it, and tell such a mature story that you wouldn't expect out of CGI animated films these days. So without a question, this is easily one of the best films of the year. I really hope that Pixar will get another Best Picture nomination for this. And of course, I've got to mention Olaf's Christmas Adventure. Bit of a controversy that it shouldn't have been in there. Like, yeah, it shouldn't have been there. It's 21 minutes. It was clearly made for television, and they slapped it in there just so they could get, the Frozen crowd in to go see the film, which is kind of sad because, Coco itself is just so great. And, Pixar usually does short films that are, 5-10 minutes, and they can tell a really great story within that time. And Olaf's holiday adventure is just kind of like an average holiday special. I mean, there's some fun jokes in there. Olaf makes some funny and witty commentary on the holidays, but it's not up there with like the likes of the short film that came with Cars 3 this year. I think it was called Loco or something. Oh, Lou. which is actually pretty clever. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that they removed that. I think it should be its own Christmas special. I think Disney should re-air it on ABC. I think we'll get great ratings, but it shouldn't be in front of Coco. But if you can last through that, Coco is easily one of the best films of the year. So for Coco, 5 out of 5 stars. Well, hopefully the audio came through this well. I had a bit of an audio issue at the beginning here. So hopefully I've got that all worked out. But you can read written reviews of these, what I've just reviewed here at movieswithmark.com, including reviews Justice League and Thor Ragnarok. I know I missed those films and I didn't cover them in a video, but you can read them there. You can also read more of my movie reviews at moviespoon.com or twincitiesgeek.com. And if you want to watch the show live or just watch a live stream of me typing up on my blog or my next book, or just playing video games, visit me at twitch.tv/movieswithmark. My name is Mark McPherson. Thank you for watching.